the SmallmouthCrush podcast. If you're a hardcore angler, you've come to the right place. This is a weekly podcast that will interview some of the top smallmouth bass anglers in North America. Travis and his guest will discuss what it takes to consistently catch big smallmouth, and you'll get a glimpse inside the mind of a trophy smallmouth angler. And now, here's your host of the SmallmouthCrush podcast, Travis Manson.
Hello, welcome to the SmallmouthCrush podcast. My name is Travis Manson. Hope you guys are having a great week. We're talking big smallmouth again, the top anglers across North America. And it's been a lot of fun. I hope you guys are enjoying these podcasts. Of course, we are airing this on my YouTube channel as well as all the podcast platforms out there. And we're learning a whole bunch along the way. This week's guest, I'm super, super excited. You know, we had a lot of local studs that know how to fish, you know, a body of water, a specific region. Of course, we had big name pros on, a little bit of everything, a mixture. And we got Seth Fighter joining us here shortly. We're going to get inside his brain, figure out what makes him love smallmouth fishing so much, and why is he so damn good at it. So I'm going to be interested to hearing what Seth has to say. But before we go there, let's talk about the Real Shot. They carry all the most wanted bass tackle that a SmallmouthCrush fan could ask for. Top brands like Mega Bass, Jackal, Evergreen, Z-Man, Daiwa, Shimano, Dirty Jigs, St. Croix rods, Kitex, you name it, they got it. Rapala, VMC, Berkeley. Easy to shop website, same-day shipping. Make sure we get that product in your tackle box before the next tournament or big bass adventure. Here's the cool part, guys. You use SmallmouthCrush 15. And they're going to give you 15% off your first order. It's therealshot.com. Tell them SmallmouthCrush sent you. And just like that, Seth pops up. What's going on, buddy?
No, not much. How you been?
Good. Man, I'm ready to talk smallmouth with you. I know when it comes to bass fishing, you know how to catch both largemouth and smallmouth, but let's really get inside your head, man. What makes you tick? Why do you love smallmouth fishing so much?
I don't know. They're just fascinating creatures. I think I'm more in love with the places they live than
Sure.
the fish themselves. And you know, they're challenging. They're the meanest thing I've ever caught, and they can humble you too. But I really enjoy chasing them, no doubt about it.
Sure.
Mostly for the fight and the aerobatics and just kind of their attitude, how fast it changes.
Absolutely. Can you give us a quick background, Seth, for listeners and viewers that might not be familiar with you? Let us know kind of what part of the country you're from and some of your local bodies of water. And of course, you do fish the Bassmaster Elite Series. So, yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit of background on yourself.
Yeah, I grew up in Minnesota, kind of real close to the famed Lake Mille Lacs. That's pretty much our premier smallmouth fishery up there. We have quite a few smaller lakes that have them, but that's where the big ones live around the Mississippi River too. So I get kind of both ends of the smallmouth spectrum, from the, you know, real finicky clear water ones to the, you know, current oriented dirty water ones. So get to see a little bit of both sides of where they live, and just absolute blast chasing them around.
Right. I mean, you have one of the best, really a popular and really, I mean, amazing fishing right in your own backyard. Are those bodies of water that you fished growing up coming from Minnesota? Are you, I mean, really intimate with those systems, or?
I am now. I mean, where I lived growing up, right around the house, is just small natural lakes. So that was all just largemouth fishing from the bank or little boats or whatever. But once I started getting into tournament fishing or exploring around a little bit more, then I started really going up to Mille Lacs a lot. And you know, in the last few years, I've really fallen in love with some of the stretches of the Mississippi River chasing. A lot different deal, more of a power deal, but it's a really cool place to catch them too. They're just not quite as big.
Sure. Good numbers on the Mississippi River?
Yeah, decent numbers. And I mean, there's a lot of 4-pounders, but you know, catching them on top water and a foot of water is a lot different than, I mean, majority of the stuff on Mille Lacs is spinning rod and light line, and playing around with them. It's fun to go, crack them on a flipping stick or a swim jig or, top water stuff. And I enjoy that too. And I can get away from everyone there on the river versus Mille Lacs is starting to get, the last 5-6 years, starting to get a lot of pressure. And the fish are a lot harder to catch out there than they used to be.
Sure. Now, the Mississippi River, it fascinates me. It's such a diverse body of water. Of course, there's a good population of both largemouth and smallmouth, and it's pretty much, whatever type of cover or whatever you want to encounter, you can find it there. I know you're fishing a lot on the Bassmaster Elite Series, and your schedule may not allow it, but throughout the year, when's a good? You get on that river as soon as you can, as far as springtime, and how does that work throughout the year for you, as far as how those fish set up? Specifically, let's talk early spring. What are you looking for on the Mississippi when you're targeting those smallmouth?
They're always current orientated to some extent, even with the exception of when they spawn and guard fry, they'll be out of it a little bit, but I haven't even seen them spawn in fairly heavy current behind big boulders or log jams, stuff like that, little eddies. But as far as the river fishing goes for me, for the smallmouth, I really like to target them early, pre-spawn, and then late again in the fall.
Okay.
Seems like summertime, it doesn't seem to be as good, like that post-spawn, early summer period. And then once you get into late summer, early fall, they seem to kind of show up again really good. But it's always current. Pre-spawn, I'd say it's almost always main river, heavy flow, wing dams, big eddies, stuff like that. A lot of the places current, they always can get behind and hide around. And then the fall is a little different. They get on more like secondary current stuff, and they really like sand and gravel and less main rivery stuff.
Are they chasing? I assume they're chasing bait fish that time of year, hardcore, and they're really schooled up in the fall. Is that what you've found?
Yeah, they're minnow eaters, and river schools never seem to be crazy big like you'd find out on a lake. Even a good school on the river, you might only catch a dozen fish off of. But I just don't think there's enough areas for them to feed on a river in a specific spot. Like a lake, you could have a giant rock pile. They could be all over it, where on a river, even on a wing dam or a sand drop, there's going to be a little 3-foot window gap on that, where that's the feeding spot. When they're biting, they're going to be right there. And on lakes, you could have giant flats that are just covered with bass, where on the river, it's real specific casts. And that's why I don't think you get quite as big of schools of catchable fish anyways. I think a lot of them will hang out a little bit further downstream, kind of in some slacker stuff when they're not like actively feeding. And when they want to bite, they'll get right on that little sweet current break or whatever it may be.
Sure. Yeah, I have a limited amount of experience on the Mississippi, but in my mind, I'm thinking current breaks like wing dams, and could be just some wood in the water, or whatever the case may be, some rock to break that up. What are the top 3 baits that you're going to be throwing in the fall time when those fish are actively up on those secondary current breaks?
The baits aren't super specific. I kind of break it down more of a water column level. Like one is always going to be a top water. It could be, it's any sort of walking style bait, a pop R style bait. It doesn't much matter much. One will be a top water. One will be kind of mid-level. It's just, halfway down the water column, whether it's a swim jig, a spinner bait, a swim bait, a lipless, something like that. And then something that I'd fish on the bottom, which would be, anything from a football jig, a Carolina rig, a tube, a Ned rig, something you can drag on the bottom. And I'll always start top and just work my way down to the bottom. I think you could catch almost all of them on like a Ned rig or something like that, but I seem to do better working through the fish, get the super aggressive ones out, then work down the water column. And the nice thing about river fish is they're fairly aggressive and not super picky. So exact colors and baits and stuff don't seem to matter as much as a well-placed cast and a bait in the right part of the water column.
Sure. I recently saw a video where you were talking about, and since we're kind of on the fall topic right now, a water temp and the different baits that you like to throw depending on that water temp. So, for viewers and listeners that haven't seen that, if you could take a few moments here and talk about that, because I found it really fascinating, the different types of baits that you like to use. So, that transition time, that late summer into fall, let's throw it out there. Water temps are finally coming down from their summer temperatures, and let's say we're in the low 60s. Can you just, I don't want to speak for you, but if you could just kind of walk me through that pattern as far as selecting baits in the water temperature.
And that's a system. All those numbers and stuff are based off of Lake Mille Lacs. That's where I've done the majority of my fall fishing. The rivers are quite a bit different. They'll seem to react more to baits in colder water than a lake fish will. So all that's based off of Mille Lacs, and that'll be, that's not going to translate to Tennessee. I mean, it does translate to Tennessee, but the numbers will be different.
Sure.
Those places are never going to see water 36 degrees and stuff like that. So it's all kind of relative, but it just, I've spent a lot of time up there in that late summer, early fall, and it definitely seems every year it goes through the same cycles of what they bite when. And gosh, I haven't been out there for a while, so numbers might be a little off, but basically like late summer, early fall, that end of August, early September, around Mille Lacs, I really do the best on a Ned rig, like a Z-Man hula stick on like a quarter ounce head. Is probably my best bait. And it seems like at some point in time in the fall, they'll end up transitioning better to a drop shot rig versus a Ned rig on the bottom, and then they'll end up going back to a Ned rig. And exact water temps, it seems like around like upper 50s to mid 60s when that drop shot bites the best out there. I don't really know what the reason is behind that. And before that and after that, I do better on a Ned rig, and other moving baits that really that upper 50s to mid 50s is kind of like wide open. The thing I found the most interesting was as far as like swim bait A-rig bite goes, most people think of a A-rig as like a wintertime deal, the coldest water of the year. And I do a lot better on an A-rig in like mid 50-degree water. And then once I get into the low 50s, upper 40s, a single swim bait just on a jig head absolutely outperforms an A-rig. And I don't know why that is, but just something I've noticed over the years. And dragging a bait's always a good way to get bit for smallmouth, but it seems like when you're in that upper 50 to low 60, like, that's when the cranking's really good, A-rig's really good, jerk baiting's really good. And then when you get in those colder temps, it really seems like stuff on the bottom, blade baits. I mean, like once the water gets below, I'd say 45, it's pretty hard to beat a blade bait. That and something you drag on the bottom really slow. But as far as moving baits go, they're pretty much done on those. And that's on a lake. You go to the Mississippi River in 40-degree water and get your arm torn off on a lipless. Those fish just react different. So I'm basing all this stuff kind of off of Mille Lacs, but yeah, definitely. And then once you get into the high 30s, it's just they get really, really hard to catch. It's pretty much blade bait and a Ned rig, and that's about it. I'd say that upper 50s is kind of when it's the most free for all. Do whatever you want.
Yeah, good stuff. Yeah, it fascinates me. And of course, we're talking about, the northern lakes. I'm sure you could take this information to any body of water that's similar in that, range, whether it be upstate New York, Michigan, Wisconsin. What's your blade bait of choice? I'm real curious on that.
I don't have the most confidence in it. It's a BioVex. It's a Japanese company, but the thing I found interesting about blade baits is like everyone that I've ever talked to that's been really into them throws a different one. I've never ran into a bunch of guys that are like, this is the blade bait. Everyone thinks theirs is the one, but you end up talking to, 10, 20 different guys that blade bait fish, and they'll all list a different blade bait. I mean, it's a fairly basic lure. It vibrates a little bit when you lift it, and then it's, heavy metal falling to the bottom after that. So I think the way you work it has a lot more to do with than the actual blade bait you throw. Because like I said, I've talked to a bunch of guys that are really into it. Everybody's told me a different blade bait was their favorite one. So
Sure.
I don't think the exact one matters that much. I will say 9 times out of 10, guys that don't fish them a lot overfish them. Like they really want to rip them off the bottom, like they're fishing a big spoon or something. And I think less is more with the blade bait. Like as soon as I feel mine starting to kick, I put it right back down. I don't really ever get mine, 2-3 feet off the bottom like I see a lot of guys doing.
Sure. Yeah, I was going to ask you the retrieve, if you could. The best advice, I think, to someone that's just starting out or wants to get into blade bait fishing, because really when those water temps get that zone, like you were saying, those fish are not going to be, they're not active and they're not really going to hit anything else. That's the most effective way to fish.
Yeah.
Number one is we got to find where they live and where they winter, right? And the
Yep.
retrieve. What, if you could just walk me through a cast. Let's say you have them located. I'm just going to pick a depth, 20 feet of water. And there's some, it's just kind of a not too rocky bottom. Are you dropping vertically? Are you casting? And then how are you retrieving that?
I'll cast. I don't usually drop vertical. I mean, if I see one, maybe, but it seems like I get the bites when my bait is at a 45-degree angle from my boat. So I'm not going to make a super long cast either. They're super heavy. I mean, you can throw a mile, but I choose not to just because it seems there must be a sweet spot in the fall rate when you get about 45-degree angle that seems what it'd be where I get most of my bites. And if you're fishing in a place like, a winter hole where there's a lot of smallmouth where they really congregate, you're probably going by fish the majority of your cast. So there must be something to do with the 45-degree angle on the line. So I'm not making a real long cast, throw it out, past what would be a 45-degree angle, work it back to it. I just throw it out, let it hit bottom on slack, pick up, and I'll usually do all my motion with the reel handle. I don't do a lot of, jerking with the rod, and it's basically just pick up on it until I feel like as soon as I feel it usually takes the brain a second or two from the second you feel it actually vibrating to the time you can stop pulling it towards you. So the second I feel that first vibration, I'm stopping the reel, but it usually ends up being 2, 3, 4 vibrations before the bait ends up going back down. And I kind of tight line it a little bit, so I think it's kind of gliding a little bit more than just falling straight on slack. And I do that all the way back to the boat. I mean, when you get close to the boat, it kind of starts feeling weird, so I'll just reel it up and make another pitch out there. But from what I've noticed, like 45-degree line angle seems to be where I get all my bites, and I think I'm going by fish the whole time I'm fishing a bait.
Yeah, definitely fascinating. It just intrigues me as far as throwing a blade bait, silver buddy. It's one of my favorite ways to fish. I think only because I only get to do it for a small amount of time. I've had a little bit of success during the summer months, and I'm curious, have you tried it much during the summer months? And have you is that a bait that you will have on deck and in your boat year round?
No, I mean, I'm sure there's definitely times where it works in the summer. But for me, it's just end of the year, winter hole, can't get bit on anything else. I pick it up. And the bite's pretty fun on it. Sometimes you get some hard thongs. So a lot of times it's just kind of mushy when you pick it up. That's the other thing. Like as soon as I start picking up my bait, and if I don't feel it vibrate, I set the hook. Like it might not be a fish, it might be, but a lot of the bites aren't as vicious as you might expect on it.
Right. I understand. Wow. So we could talk probably another hour about blade bait fishing, but let's move on a little bit. You have a lot of experience fishing all over the country. I really want to know, what's your favorite place to fish for smallmouth?
I'd say probably either the St. Lawrence River, or I have a love-hate relationship with St. Clair.
Okay.
It St. Clair is probably one of the best smallmouth lakes in the country. the lack of structure in it and the lack of being able to pinpoint fish there really drives me nuts. And but I think that's kind of what makes that lake so good. That the whole lake is basically a giant featureless flat is kind of what keeps them safe, because they can live in the entire lake, and they don't really have to relate to certain structure. But at the same time, it makes it like, I like, especially tournament, I like you pull up to your waypoint and you no, you throw right there and you're going to catch one, and that just doesn't exist on Lake St. Clair.
Wow. Yeah.
9 times out of 10,
Right. So walk me through. I want to get in your head, Seth, when it comes to, let's talk St. Clair, or generally any body of water where these fish might be roaming and they're not really tied down to anything specific. How are you going to go about, whether it be practicing for an event or you just want to go out and fun fish? What's some advice you can give to someone that's just looking to figure out a featureless place? Where do you start, and how do you go about your day finding these fish?
I got a couple methods I use. I do a lot of depending on the year, if there's noticeable grass clumps out there, I'll do a lot of what I call fast idling, where I maybe run around 25, 30 mile an hour. I mean, the whole lake's flat, so anytime you see a little weed clump come off the bottom, you can put a waypoint on that, and that's usually something that will semi-hold them. And then the other thing is, I just noticed over the years, how many times you pull into an area, drop the trolling motor, and you'd catch one first cast, second cast, almost immediately. And I'm not pulling up on anything, just randomly stopping your St. Clair. That just turned into a reoccurring theme. So I definitely think they get curious around the boats, and that kind of draws them in when you're moving around in there. So something I've been doing the last couple of years is I'll literally just essentially grid the lake off, where I'll fish, drift for a little bit. I don't catch anything. I'll just pick up, run down half a mile. It seems like when you find schools on St. Clair, especially summertime, I don't know anything about there in the spring, but in the summertime, the schools are in big areas. It'll be a half mile or mile square where the fish are, but it's not like a school you think all grouped up. It's just that area's got fish roaming around in it. So a lot of times I'll fish an area real quick. I mean, 10 minutes, I don't get a bite, I'll pick up, drive my boat quarter mile or a half mile or maybe a mile, drop the trolling motor, fish for 5-10 minutes, pick it up, and just keep doing that down the lake, then turn around, come up, and just keep cutting over and grid the lake up. It just seems like when you get in an area that has them, that you catch fish immediately. So I don't spend a lot of time. I see a lot of guys, they'll just drift for miles and miles, and they will eventually run into them. But and I'll start working in, say I stop 2-3 times and don't get a bite, and then I go down another half mile, I'll get a bite. Then I'll just start working that in from all directions to get a base of where I feel the school is, that half mile, quarter mile square where I think they are. So if I get a bite, I'll hit a waypoint, and then I'll, fish it from a different direction. As soon as I get a bite, I'll hit a waypoint, come in from a different direction. As soon as I get a bite, I'll hit a waypoint. So then I'll establish, and they're big on St. Clair. It might be a 1 mile square where the fish are living, but then I know that during my tournament day that, I'm just going to make my, I got perimeters to it where I can just keep making. Once I'm actually fishing a tournament, I'll start making my drifts in that area.
Wow, man, that's fascinating, because of course there's not a whole lot of structure. We're looking for little, I guess, starting points. Sounds like you're just idling or going at a slower speed, watching your 2D, I assume, for any little rise or any difference at those speeds, and then maybe slowing it down and doing some side image and seeing what they're holding on. And maybe it's nothing, right? Sometimes you're probably like, why are these fish even in this area?
Absolutely. Crazy. And there is some stuff in St. Clair. There's some rock piles and stuff like that, and I fished a bunch of them, and majority of the time I don't catch anything off of them. And then you do find an area where you catch them, and then you side scan through the area, and it's like, why are they? There's nothing discernible that would make them there. I think it's just that's where the fish are at that given time.
Yeah. Well, I can see why you have a love-hate relationship at on St. Clair and a featureless bottom of water. And even you mentioned the St. Lawrence River, Lake Ontario as possibly one of your favorite places to fish. totally different, I assume,
Oh yeah.
from St. Clair. But even when we know where these fish live, sometimes they
Yeah.
leave, you know? So that's just what smallmouth do. And it's so fascinating to
Yeah.
hear how people break that down and search for those fish. When you're on a body of water like the St. Lawrence River or a Great Lake that has the traditional stuff that you're looking for, the rock piles, the points, the edges and whatnot.
Yeah.
Where's your go-to starting point? Are you going to start, because there's a good shallow bite and a deep bite throughout the year?
Yep.
Where are you going to start when you fish these types of bodies of water?
I just kind of let the conditions dictate it. I mean, if it's glass, calm, and sunny, I'll be shallow all
Okay.
day. Like I'm not
Yeah.
even gonna mess with the deep bite. If it's cloudy and windy, I'll be deep all day. I'm not gonna mess with the shallow bite.
Mhm.
And I think those fish move back and forth between the two. I really do, because I've tried to I'd prefer to catch them shallow there. That's my
Okay.
favorite way to fish there. Um, and I've tried to make that work on days when the conditions aren't right. And I don't know if it's because you can't see them and you don't get to sneak up on them as good, or make good casts to them because you can't see them, or I really think they're just not even there.
Right.
Just because there's a lot of those places where there's so many that first bomb through there, you'd get one on something and you don't catch them. So I think those fish bounce back and forth between the deep and the shallow based on conditions as well.
Right. It's been a theme. A lot of I guess, the really super like big sticks, the big names that you hear about, the guys that are super successful in these events in clear water. You would think, because you hear so much about smallmouth in deep water, but the consensus I have is a lot of these guys spend a lot of time shallow throughout the year fishing that pattern. And for a lot of people that may have tried that before, because a lot of bodies of water don't set up that way. But when you get into that clear water and you can actually see these fish before they bite, I mean, it's exciting. That's probably why you love doing it. I mean, seeing that
Oh
six
yeah.
pounder before he bites is
Yeah.
incredible. Walk me through your setup when you're looking for these fish that are cruising around. Are you throwing a reaction bait? Are you just going to pitch a finesse bait? Or how are you finding those fish and actually getting them to bite?
I'll usually do a power and a finesse approach. I'll usually start out with power fishing them, and that's usually going to be like a jerk bait for me for power fishing them, really. And I will, just because it seems like anytime you get it, I don't care where you're at, even if you're on the most heavily fished place in the world and super clear water, like if there's 20 smallmouths up there, 3 of them are dumb as hell. You know what I mean?
Mm,
Like if I can catch
right.
him on a fluke on 17-pound line, I'm doing it. Like no doubt
Okay.
about it. He's going in the boat. We're boat flipping him. I'm not messing around with them.
Mm,
Um, Now the majority of them you're going to have to catch on a spinning rod, but there's always going to be a few. I mean, especially if they're like jet black ones. Those are
yep.
those are your biters. Like the jet black ones, you can catch those on a big rod and a big bait and don't got to play with them. But there's only going to be a couple of those. So I'll start off with it's usually a soft plastic jerk bait for me. Big
Okay.
line, 4/0 hook, and hammer them and boat flip them, get them out of the way, and then I'll go to work on them. And every day is different, and every fish is
Okay.
different. Some might get caught on a drop shot, some you might need to Ned rig or a little tube. Um, some might only want a spade or a jig, something like that. So I definitely got a lot of stuff laid on the deck when I'm chasing around those shallow ones. But it's cool too because you can kind of pick your fish out. You know what I mean? If there's
Mm-hmm.
a bunch of 3-pounders up there and you see one big 5-pounder, you can chase him around and work them and
Mm-hmm.
target fish. Where I feel like when you're fishing out deep, you're kind of just almost lucky the big ones you catch. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like you
Right.
get up in shallow and some clear water, I mean, you see a 5-pounder that you need, you can hunt them down and catch them. And where out deep, I mean, you're just trying to catch as many fish as you can and hope one of them's a big one.
Right. Right. So these shallow water fish, we'll just say the St. Lawrence River. You go back there, you have a lot of big events there. You've been there a bunch of times, I'm sure. When you find an area where those fish come up shallow, are those areas that you're continuously going back to in practice, or are you looking for new shallow water as well? Like, how do you approach that? And is there years where you've caught them shallow in one area and just for some reason, maybe it could be timing, it could be that week they're just not there? Do you find that as well, or?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, there's definitely some places that I've seen them almost every time we've been there, but I've noticed the last couple you've had, you know, real high and real low water, and that definitely changed where they lived.
Okay.
So that's something to do with it. And but a lot of them are historic. If the water, I feel like if the water level is the same, they're going to be on the same stuff. So each year I'm able to add, you know, a few to the arsenal. Definitely never make a cast at them in practice. I like to
Right.
keep them as dumb as possible. So it's all visual, just cruising around, seeing them, marking them, and you know, just trying to add to the repertoire of stuff I have up there. And yeah, some years it'll be loaded on one deal and then you'll go back the next year. And the biggest difference I've seen is not so much that the fish haven't been there. It seems like a good shallow spot will always have fish on it, but for some reason, one year they're all big ones, and then back next year and they're all 2-pounders there, you know.
Okay.
So I think the bigger ones kind of move around, but it seems like a good shallow spot will almost always have some fish on it. As long as it's, you know, calm and sunny and you got the right weather.
Right. So what makes, in your mind, could you walk us through what would be the best, I guess, bottom content in an area to start looking? Like, what gets you excited when you come across something shallow?
There's a lot of different stuff they can be on. It's mostly, I would say, on the St. Lawrence River, it's usually going to be sand with a little bit of rock mixed into it. Sometimes just clean sand, but and I know there's some guys that catch them good out of like little holes in the grass and stuff. I've never really got on that deal, but for me, it's usually some sort of current seam, and then it's a pretty clean bottom,
Okay. Are these
which makes it
big?
for you to see them too. You know.
Sure. Are these big areas or sometimes just small little stretches?
No, they've all been really small stretches. I mean, they'll
Have
be
they?
on a bigger piece of structure, but there'll be a little. I mean, basically, you can probably cast from one end of it to the other on the good shallow stuff I've seen there. But um, you know, there's other areas where they are kind of all over too. I've seen some real shallow rock stuff on looked like trout water, and they were just kind of random all over through there. But like ideal setup for me would be like, you know, a little sand point sticking out, 20-yard strip of sand with a nice clean rock edge on it and some current rolling on it would be about perfect for me. But you know, they get on all kinds of little different stuff there.
Sure. So let's say you spent a bunch of time in practice leading up to an event. You got a lot of areas where these fish are marked. You're feeling good. Day one, cloudy. We'll give you like 4-footers, right? Blowing. Are you going to go after those fish or are you bailing on that?
No, I'll bail on them. I've learned my
You
lesson.
will.
You're not going to catch them.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll just, I
Okay.
mean, I'd rather go fish random deep than back to the shallow stuff. I just know you're just not going to catch them.
And it's just because it's harder to see them, or do you think
I just think they're
they
not
just build
there.
up?
Yeah. I don't think
Okay.
they're there. I mean, you can get a couple, but you're not going to catch the, you know, 22, 24 pounds, whatever you need that
Yeah. Right.
day. You might be able to scrap them up there, but that don't do you any good.
Walk me through your deep water setup then. I know you rely a lot on your graphs, I assume. And so when you're heading to a new body of water, you know, we're trying to give people some tips here to find some deeper fish. What are you going to be looking for before you even get out there to idle it? And, you know, what makes you decide to head over in this zone and check this specific structure out and see if they're holding? How does that whole process work for you throughout the day when you're looking for those deeper fish?
I'd say wind's got a lot to do with it. Um, I mean, the deep structure is always going to be kind of the same for smallmouth. It's going to be points and humps, and you know, I'm going to look for stuff that the wind's pushing straight into. You know, even if it is a hump, yeah, obviously wind could hit all sides of it, but I'd probably focus on, you know, if the wind's coming out of the south, fishing the south side of the hump, or if you're looking at big reefs, at kind of the, you know, the ones that taper out in towards the direction the wind's coming from, look there. If you got no wind, there's not much you can do about that. But I'd say mostly if I could pick like one structure I'd key in on, it'd be large rock. But not every lake's the same. Not everyone's laid out similar. So a lot of the lake relate to grass edges and really subtle stuff. But in a perfect world, I would just look for like giant boulders, but those aren't everywhere, and a lot of lakes don't have them.
How's your setup as far as graphs when you're idling through there?
Probably more side imaging. Seeing those boulders and stuff like that more so than marking fish. There's a lot of stuff I've fished that I haven't hardly marked anything on, and there's quite a few fish there, especially in rocky scenarios. I think those fish will kind of get in those crevices and stuff, and you're just not going to see them on your 2D really, unless they rise up above the rock. I mean, sometimes they're sitting on top of the rock, you'll see them, but I just, drove over a lot of stuff that I didn't mark a fish on that ended up having a lot of fish. And I'll actually use a camera quite a bit now. Gussie kind of got me turned on to that, like especially like St. Lawrence River. I don't graph for fish. I literally camera the whole time if I'm looking for deep fish. The water's so clear, you can see so good on that camera. They're really hard to mark unless you catch them like on the backside of a big drop where they're kind of stacked up or whatever. They're super hard to mark on 2D DI. And then when you do mark them, there's so many walleye and drum and all that other stuff in there, you don't really know what you're seeing. So that camera has kind of been huge for finding the deep fish on St. Lawrence. And and then they're just so curious. Like, I think you end up calling a lot of fish to you with that camera than if you were to just drive down it with your 2D, you know what I mean? Like you might have been 10, 15 feet off to the side of the fish, but they see that big thing floating and bouncing and crunching on the bottom and kicking up dust, and they'll come over and look at it. So I think you find a lot more with the camera than you do like 2D DI stuff.
Yep. Very good information. Now it's a lot of work, right? Dealing with that camera and that current and making sure you get
in the butt. I put a bunch of weight on it, but it's worth it. And that way you don't have to catch any either too. Like I have full confidence going back to where I see them on a camera versus, if you mark some fish and then you fish it, and a lot of them spots don't have a ton of fish on them. There might only be, especially after looking at them with a camera, there might be 5 of them down there. 2 of them are giants, 3 of them are 3-pounders. If you mark those on your and drift through a drop shot and practice and you catch one of the 5-pounders, like that's really unnecessary.
Yep. So. No, that was good stuff, man. That's really important. And anytime you get around that clear body of water, you could drop a camera down. Even when you're out on a big body of water, like, I mean, you could pick anywhere, say the eastern basin of Erie, clear water out there, and you're in 30, 40 feet of water. Like you said, I'm not to the point where I can tell the difference sometimes between a drum and a walleye and a smallmouth. And you probably found the massive school and dropped down. You're like, what's going on? Before you start changing baits and stuff, you better take a look and see what you're working with, right?
Yeah.
And that's it's an important tool. And nowadays they're the size of your cell phone. I mean, when I first started fishing, I had one of them in a bag. It weighed like 50 pounds. Those kind of talking about. And now they're tiny. They're tiny, but no, this is some good stuff. What do you think your strengths are when it comes to smallmouth fishing?
I'd say it's probably more my mindset than anything.
Yeah. Well.
I don't think I'm like a better drop shotter than anybody or can drag a Ned rig around better than anybody. It's just the smallmouth mind frame that don't fall in love with anything, don't get attached to anything, don't be afraid to just go fishing because you can catch them so quick even on a terrible day. You know what I mean? There's so many days where you have a good practice and you spend the first half of it checking places where you caught them in practice, and you got like a few 2-pounders in the live well, and you just keep hunting and hunting and hunting, and then you pull up on the right spot at the right time, and you 4 or 5-pounders real quick, and you got a big bag. So smallmouth fishing is more like hunting to me than largemouth fishing. Like there's some fish biting somewhere. They move around a lot, but when you get around them, you will catch them.
As far as any techniques that you feel like you could improve upon, meaning maybe some baits that work good for smallmouth, or techniques that you just don't utilize too often, that maybe you're like, man, I'd love to be able to fish them this way a little bit more. Is there anything like that you can think of?
Usually when something comes out, I kind of go all in on it.
Okay.
Really, the last one I can think of was spy baiting. And I did
Uh,
quite a bit of that since that came. Well, I shouldn't say since it came out. Like the last few years, that was a big weak point for me was spy baiting.
okay.
So the last few years, I really got into that. And
Was it
then,
more you forced yourself just because it
yeah,
was such a good technique and you're like, what am I, I'm missing
yeah,
a beat by not.
there was a time and place where I felt like um, I was leaving a lot of fish down there that I could have caught on spy baits.
Mm,
Um, there's always new stuff coming out, but I keep it pretty simple, man.
sure.
And when something new comes out, I'll be all over that too. Guess I don't know where I'm the weakest, but
Yeah.
um,
Well, no, that was a good explanation of it because there's a lot of these techniques that we watch, the pros come and fish them and we know they catch fish, but we just resort sometimes back to what we always use. And I think the spy bait is, if someone's looking at exploring that, it's a whole different way of fishing.
yeah,
It takes some time, but there's so much good information out there. All you got to do is get on YouTube and Google spy bait, and you can get dialed in pretty quick. What do you think makes those fish relate, so well to that presentation and that bait?
the subtleness of it. Seems like the fish that react to that don't want anything crazy moving around. I think it like entrances them somehow. They come up behind it like they're under a spell. You know what I mean?
Okay, sure.
It's kind of real similar to a hair jig deal, but it just seems to work a lot better kind of midsummer through early fall, where I feel like that's kind of when the hair jig falls off, you know.
Hmm.
They're real similar baits, and even the way you fish them, one can be fished quite a bit deeper than the other, but um, I feel like it's a real similar deal. I think it's the same reason why the hair jig works so well. It's just super subtle, just no like negative cues to it,
Hmm.
and I see the hair jig as more of a pre-spawn through 4th of July time, and the spy bait like 4th of July through September kind of deal, but real similar concept.
I know you love throwing that hair jig as well, and even designed a hair jig that just catches them. I use it all the time. You want to talk a little bit about that hair jig and what makes that so special?
I think we have the right hook in it. It needs to be light wire. It's got to be super sharp, and we put a little keeper in there for hold your plastics on there. But I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they're all really similar. There's not a lot of difference to them. It's a small piece of lead with some marabou on the back, but I think the little like where I like the line tie and the hook and the keeper, and that's kind of what I think makes it the best one out there.
Sure. And where can people go to find that exact hair jig that you're talking about?
It's Outcast Tackle Fighter Fly. They sell them all over. You can go straight to Outcast Tackle, or Omnia Fishing has them for sure. I know they're in Tackle Warehouse too. So
Right. Now there's a lot of different colors, but if you could someone that just wants to start getting into it or want to keep things basic, talk about the general size. If you could
yeah,
pick just one size and maybe one or two colors, what would you go with?
yeah, we got few options in sizes and quite a few options in colors, but day in and day out, it's straight black 332nd.
Mm,
That's about all I really throw. There is um, and I've had some good days on the damsel green color around mayfly hatches, like when they're actively feeding on mayflies. I've seen that outperform the black, but that's the one scenario where black isn't the best. And
okay.
um, yeah, it's like 90% black, 10% damsel green. But that's like when you're seeing them like popping mayflies off the surface is the only time I've seen that color outperform
Okay.
straight black. And I always throw 332nd. It's
Sure. Walk
just
me through
kind of
that
my
because a
side.
lot of a lot of people, I mean, you have to be we hear about mayfly hatches here and there, but there's probably a lot of people that maybe miss that or they're not there at the right time. When you encounter that, what time of year does that normally happen for you? And what are the conditions? And then how are you working that hair jig around that mayfly hatch specifically? I really want to dig into that.
Yeah. Basically, if you go to the gas station in the morning and the gas pumps aren't like covered in mayflies, it's probably not happening. But
Okay.
I've seen it be like regional on a lake too, like even Mille Lacs. Like sometimes like the mayflies are hatching on the north end and they're not on the south end.
Mm,
So there is a little bit of that, but typically for us, it's mid to late June is when we get our biggest mayfly hatch, and there will be a couple throughout the year. It's not like a one day and done type deal, but typically if you go to the lights at the gas station attract them. If you go to a gas station in the morning and don't see a bunch of mayflies, probably not happening. Or if you get to the lake, and especially if you're on the bank the wind's blowing into, if you don't see carcasses everywhere, it's probably not happening. And then also, I mean, you're going to be getting them on your boat and flying and landing all over you. And or if it's glass com, you'll see fish surfacing.
You'll know it. Yeah.
Just little. It's not like a big explosion like they're eating a minnow or nothing. It's just they just come up and like kind of kiss the surface. But like every one of those you see, if you can get a hair jig in there, it's like over. You caught them pretty much.
How deep of water does this occur in, or is there a range?
I think it occurs across the whole lake. I don't think there's a certain depth that it's applying to. But
let me give you an example. If you're in, say, 12, 15 feet of water and you see that happening, are you working that hair jig right below the surface, or still kind of like a normal retrieve somewhere else where that isn't happening? I'm just curious if you're trying to get way up.
Yeah. I am keeping it way up, almost like slow rolling a spinner bait, kind of.
Okay, so real slow,
steady moving and up in the water, calling them, like not letting it sink or tight lining it or doing nothing like that. Just straight, steady retrieve. But it's usually pretty, especially if you see one pop, you just throw it right past it and reel it right there, and they usually grab it every time. But I'll do the same thing, just blind casting and just keep it up and moving. And that's the only time I really do good on that, like yellowish damsel green, whatever you want to call it.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. Good stuff, man. That takes it a little step further. I mean, another great application when you're using the hair jig. It works for me year round. I know you can catch them shallow, deep with that. Steady retrieve. You've done a lot of good videos on that, and definitely want to get your hands on that particular hair jig, because the hook, and really, I do like the head of that. I think it comes through the water column perfectly. And I've caught tons of fish just like you have on that hair jig. And it's something you guys need to start using if you haven't thought about it before in the past. Really good stuff, Seth. We're running out of time, but I do want to ask you a couple closing questions here. I want to know what your biggest personal best smallmouth is.
7.2.
7.2. Where did that come
Mille
out?
Lacs.
Okay.
Mille Lacs on a late fall single swim bait after the A-rig bite was done. I think it was like 48-degree water. I don't remember the exact date, but end of October.
Fun fishing or tournament?
Oh, fun fishing, of course. No.
Right.
Never catch those in tournaments.
That's a beast, man. They got them there. That's for sure. I mean, you're real, living in the north of Minnesota, there's so many good inland lakes. We talked about the Mississippi River. That got me excited, guys, for anyone that's looking to head out over there. There's so many different ways to catch them. And then, of course, your love for the St. Lawrence River. And, man, just crystal clear water, sight fishing. You know your stuff, Seth. I mean,
those are the meanest ones on planet Earth.
Yeah.
Like if I could land everyone I hooked at the St. Lawrence River, I'd do a lot better there. It's just like Mille Lacs are so easy to catch. They just like bulldog and that's it. And the ones on the St. Lawrence are straight psychopaths. Like
I was going to ask
5 feet out of like every day of my life I've been on the St. Lawrence River. I've lost like multiple big ones that would have made a huge difference. And like most other places we go, I can fish pretty. Like St. Clair's easy.
You can fish clean.
Yeah, like it is impossible to fish clean at the St. Lawrence River. In my opinion, I've never done it. Like it never fails.
Right.
Good break stuff. One off, jump one off, whatever. Something always happens.
Yeah, man. Crazy stuff, those fish. I know you're big into Z-Man baits. I am too. We talk about that a lot on my YouTube videos as well as the podcast. But man, it's crazy. Those things catch fish regardless of the style of a Z-Man bait. It's just a fish catching machine.
No doubt about it. Yeah. No, they're awesome. If you're net rigging and you're not using one, you're messing up. That's for sure. And drop shot in the last few years, I've been doing a lot of drop shot stuff with them too. Those little streaks and stuff, those minnow baits.
Yeah.
Especially get around those lakes that got perch grass in them or the bottom's kind of clogged up. Having a bait that floats seems to make a big difference.
Good way to follow. You
I'm mostly on Instagram, Seth Fighter Fishing. I got a Facebook too. But yeah, mostly active on Instagram and Seth Fighter Fishing on everything.
Perfect. Now, if you could have one bait to use for smallmouth for the coming season, let's just say next year, You can only throw one bait. What would that bait be?
Probably be a green pumpkin hula stick on like a 3/16 ounce net head.
You know, you and Gussie are in the same boat. I heard that from him as well. Fish catching, I mean, you can't
if you only get one,
right?
that can catch them when they're biting, and it's going to catch them when they're not biting. So
sure.
Yeah.
Shallow, deep, doesn't matter.
Yeah, don't matter.
Crazy. Well, awesome, Seth. I appreciate you hanging out with us today. I know we learned a lot.
Thanks for having me.
All right, guys. Awesome information. And as always, until next time, we'll see you guys on the water.
Thanks so much for listening today. Make sure that you're subscribed to the show and follow us on Instagram at SmallmouthCrush. Also, the YouTube channel, SmallmouthCrush. And if you feel so inclined, please leave us a 5-star rating and comment with a review below. And as always, until next time, we'll see you on the water.